So let's continue where we just left off with Dr. Montier. There have been a number of experiments that have been done since his original experiments. And one additional experiment is very interesting. It's taking a test tube in very diluted solution of water and placing a DNA strand in it, and having a second test tube with just pure water in it. And when the Schumann resonance was introduced, there is a transfer of information between the DNA test tube and the pure water test tube. And there begins to be an imprint formed. The DNA is constructing life through a conscious transmission on the Schumann resonance. Now, in a few minutes, this is going to become somewhat useful to you because it's a wonderful experiment, but it is much more useful to you in terms of understanding this expansion of consciousness that we're in. Now, the 7.83 Schumann resonance has the ability to spike up and down. Now, we don't see the down spikes very often, but you do see the up spikes. There's another aspect of you that vibrates at 7.83 hertz or cycles per second. And it is in the brain, and it's what's called the alpha wave, kind of the vibrational thought structure of your thinking in your walking around space. This alpha wave pattern allows you to think, analyze. It has a lot to do with the mechanics of the autonomic nervous system, of the circulatory system, and really how you think and perceive in the world. There are beginning to be a number of factors that are changing your world. There are external factors that are coming in. You have a lot of changes going on in the sun right now. The magnetic fields of the earth are changing. But the ones that are going to become very interesting in the next couple of years is time, space, and gravity. Now, when I have my conversations with the archangelics and the lords of light, they've been very emphatic about this Schumann resonance being a point of balance. Everything basically vibrates plus or minus, if you would, on how this Schumann resonance is perceived in the human body. The heartbeat of the earth, the brain pattern in the alpha waves, but also part of the heart. As the heart functions in balance, you know it as a smile. You know it as looking at a little child doing something and you smiling, you saying, gee, that's really cute. That feels good. That feel-good space with no engagement in it is the Schumann resonance, 7.83. It's a balanced level of consciousness that moves through you. Now, it's been very interesting of late having conversations with Archangel Gabriel, Raphael, and Zadkiel. Zadkiel very much talking about the structuring of the changes of consciousness that we're having. Raphael talking very much about the heart vibrations in the sacred heart and what's necessary to begin to step up the consciousness that each one of us are so much wanting to see happen in the world. And Gabriel talking about the sound templates and how the sound vibrations of the change of consciousness from one realm to another realm, one dimension to another dimension, is all very much being played out at this particular time. But right now, this balance point, this Schumann resonance, this 7.83 hertz cycles per second, is very important to you particularly, me particularly, because as the world begins to be shifted around, as the disruption being transformation, shifting from one state of consciousness to another state of consciousness plays out, there is disruption. And I've been talking quite a bit over the last months about these 3 waves of light that are coming in. 2 of these waves are very much about disengaging the noise, the fears, the challenges that we each hide, the baggage that we walk around with. Whereas the 3rd wave is really very much about smoothing out and repositioning your point of reference. In the thought pattern, it's a kind of fascinating 7.83, a balance point. When you begin to get into that smile in the heart, there begins to be an opportunity, or you start to, in a way, drop into a slower vibration, a vibration that is under the 7.83. In the brainwave patterns, it's called theta or delta, but mostly those are sleeping state brainwave patterns for everybody. But they really are walking around patterns when you can begin to get quiet and structured and realign your point of reference. But at the same time, this Schumann resonance is very affected by these electrical charges. It's an electrical system. And thoughts are electrical, emotions are magnetic. And what you're watching is this transition in the world at this point, and it's really pretty choppy. Just look around. When the Schumann resonance begins to get out of balance in terms of the mental structure, the electrical thinking structure, or fear also, there begins to be these spikes, and we're starting to see these spikes. When you begin to move into the spiked range of the Schumann resonance, when it begins to rise up electrically, and you begin to find that thought moves into what's called the mid or high beta range, there's something specifically occurring. You begin to think in that range. It's an analytical range. Many people are very smart in that, but we're not talking about intelligence. We're really talking right here about when you start to spike into these mid-beta ranges, something specific happens. Empathy begins to go away. And you begin to think your way through life without an empathetic balance point to determine engagement with others. Now look around. As the world right now is going into nationalism, as it's going into us and them, as it's drawing pretty hard lines, you're getting an intellectual set of responses. This is the truth. This is what has to happen. Do this. But you're beginning to lose an empathetic aspect of it. Now when the 7.83 begins to drop into a place where you don't see it very often, into that theta, into that delta range, you begin to still have the ability to think, but you begin to step into an expanded realm of empathy that we all call compassion. There's a little bit of a piece of work that has to occur between empathy and compassion. But when you start to move into that space, you start to be able to have consideration. If you look around right now, half the world's in this empathy, compassion space, and kind of half the world, at least in the United States, is in this kind of thinking, nationalistic point of reference. One of the things that is kind of important at this point, and this is, I'm again talking to you, because if you're listening to this, you're in that state of moving into this compassion, into other realms, into different dimensions. All this is opening up with these shifts in magnetic fields of the earth, the magnetic resonance of your body. But one aspect of your thinking when you begin to move into that empathetic, compassionate zone that's now becoming available, I'm going to call it zooming out or zooming in. You know, it's the space when you were a little kid, you just knew your house and your yard and maybe your block. And then as you got a little bit more aware, you began to know about 2 or 3 blocks. You began to have a sense of where the store was. Then you went off to school. You did 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. Each one of those began to be an expansion of your awareness. Stepped into adolescence. A whole new configuration of understanding came into that. Went into college, high school, college, etc. Zooming out, expanding your awareness. Right now you're in a zooming out space. If you can begin to get quiet, begin to drop into this point of observation where you're observing your reality and not grabbing hold of the noise, staying out of the threats and the challenges, you're going to start to find the ability to see things that are in front of you that you haven't seen before. Oh, they've been there. You just haven't had the wherewithal to see them. As this Schumann resonance begins to expand right now, according to Zadkiel, this is about to see an increase into the beta range and an increase into the theta range. So in a way, it's Choose. How do you wish to experience yourself? But the choosing piece is where I really want to talk about. Because as you begin to choose this space of empathy, compassion, awareness, it starts to create a reactionary response potentially in, I don't like what's going on out there. As you begin to step into this choice space, choice is different than duality. Duality is the good and the bad and the right and the wrong and the should and shouldn't, and then it's arguing for one half or the other half of that point of view. Where you're stepping into an expanded realm is stepping into a place of choice, not in argument, not in debate, not in good and bad and taking sides. Now, this understanding is going to become really important going forward. Because as you get into choice and you begin to recognize the duality and not put your finger into it, you're going to start to find that you may have a level of communication that begins to happen that is expanded. You see, in that quiet space, in that realignment space, there's a restructuring that occurs. That Schumann resonance at 7.83 starts to decline in speed. It begins to drop down in cycles per second. You begin to step into this theta state of consciousness. It's in that theta state of consciousness that you begin to find an accessing to the higher self. And that's in the heart. And so this sacred heart space begins to open. And what makes that so important is the higher self is the bridging point to the soul. Now, in a couple days, we're going to talk about the soul. What is the soul? How do I relate to the soul? How does the soul see things? Why is it even important to me? It's important to you. But when the heart is closed down, when I'm in fear, in past and future, in doubt, and I'm spiking my own brainwave patterns up into analyzing and protecting myself, that set of patterns doesn't create a fertile ground in the heart. As this transition continues to unfold, and the ability to begin to expand your perspective, begin to look over the edge. What's on the other side of the edge that I'm looking at, creating different choice points. The Schumann resonance, that smile in the heart, begins to allow you to see from different perspectives. It's in these perspectives that the sacred heart starts to become fertile. And as the sacred heart starts to become fertile, the soul has a place to begin to anchor in the physicalness. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of days. This will sound like an outrageous statement I'm going to make, but in a lot of ways, the soul doesn't even care about you. Doesn't even care about you. Because the soul and the higher self will not come down into that anger, rage, resentment, I'm upset, things are bad, I'm in fear. Soul and you are one, but in the creation that you're playing in, soul and the higher self will not engage with you. And so this Schumann resonance, beginning to find the smile, beginning to observe without going into the noise, beginning to discern between duality and choice. This Schumann resonance is opening into the theta space in the brainwave pattern. It's expanding into levels of consciousness being able to be made available to you in ways that you cannot even imagine at this point. These conversations I have with the various archangels and lords of light, they're emphatic. They are thrilled at this moment of what's possible because there's one more piece. And the reason that you will go into that theta space rather than going up into the beta spaces is because you hold the dream. See, you know that there is a possibility. And you've dreamt this possibility for a long time. That possibility has never left you. As you begin to step into this bridging space with the higher self and the soul, and begin to have an understanding of what the soul knows, the ability to begin to create the imprint through the Schumann resonance into a state of consciousness, into a state of an awareness of the dream, and begin to manifest the dream on the earth, is something you have the capacity to do. It's not a free lunch. Some assembly is required. But it's beginning to understand your choices and how things work mechanically that allows you to choose in a manner to find the smile when you start to look at the little kid playing in the sandbox. And you may find yourself right there. So, come and play in the next couple of days in this webinar that's going to be presented. Who is the soul? What is the soul? How does it relate to me? How does the soul look at life and death? How do I begin to become one with the soul? I think you'll enjoy what you find. Look forward to playing with you.